Alright, well, I can officially say I did not get jack squat accomplished today. It's just been really freaking cold and really freaking windy, and it snowed most of the day, so I didn't really have any big aspirations of going out and freezing my ass off to do anything outside. Don't really have anything at this current moment I could work on inside. Was gonna go clean fence rows today until I walked out and saw what it was doing, and I was like, well, shot that idea down. But I did go through and got my chainsaw serviced out, so there's that. And I did manage to get a lead on a wet bin and a grain dryer today, so there's that. But I wanted to get a video up today, and well, I guess it's tonight now because it's dark outside, but I figured I'd do one I've wanted to get done here for a little while. Just never got around to doing it. And that's about, well, not about this little guy back here. Eventually I will be doing a story on this tractor, but I want to do it when I got it running and not back here in a hole. Or at least running. It'll probably stay back here in its hole because we don't really do a whole lot with it, but I at least want to do a video on this one when it's running. So this will not be a story about this tractor. What this is going to be is how you tell the difference between a 4-speed 60 and a 2-speed 60. Now the 60s came out the tail end of 1940, beginning of 1941, somewhere in there. When they first came out, from the beginning of production until the end of 1944, you had the 4-speed 60. That's what this one is. This is a wartime tractor. This is 1944 4-speed. So, we'll start with a 4-speed. First thing, and the easiest thing, your easiest first glance thing to tell you got a 4-speed 60 is the shift lever. 4-speed 60, the gear shift will always be straight if it's a true 4-speed. The other big thing that's first glance is you come around here to the grill, and hopefully it'll show up in the camera. You see those two little arms right there with little pull rods on them. And what those are is brake actuators. And those little arms, I doubt I'll get them where you can see them. Yeah, I don't think I can get them where you can see them. But basically, what those little arms do is, yeah, they're right up. They run inside the curl of the frame right here. And they run from the steering pedestal back here to the brake pedals. Now you notice on a 4-speed 60, that's the other thing. On a 4-speed 60, they will have individual brake pedals that do not have the connecting bar between them. And the other, or what them little rods do is, hold on a second, I got a tool that's going to make this a whole lot easier. Okay, much better. Forgot I got one of these handy dandy slide on the bill of your hat lights for Christmas, and I gotta say it's kind of freaking awesome, but I forget I have it, and it's actually a lot wider beam than a flashlight, so it's better for you guys too. Anyway, what those rods do, if I can get back here on the tractor, is, damn it, I'm not going to have enough room to turn the wheels. Anyway, if you turn the wheels, or front wheels, all the way locked one way or the other, it will apply the inside brake to your turn. And the purpose of that was most of the very early 60s came out on steel. And anybody that's ever driven a steel wheel tractor knows it's about like driving a rototiller, and they do not turn very well. So the point of that was to turn and apply your turning brake without you having to actually manually hit it with your foot. You would turn all the way to the lock, tractor would automatically apply the turning brake, you'd complete your turn, you'd straighten the wheels back out, brake would come off, keep on going. So, and you can see that right there is the actuating rod coming back from the front, and you can see what it doesn't do anything when you manually hit the brake, but when you turn the wheel, and I don't got enough room up there to turn the wheels far enough, but you got to turn it all the way to the lock. If you just do a partial turn, it won't apply them because you don't need it. Generally, you only need obviously the turning brakes are for when you're doing tight turns, when you obviously have the front wheels turned all the way. So 4-speed 60, it's going to have those brake actuator levers with the pull rods, individual brake pedals without the connecting bar, straight gear shift, and then the foot pedal for your trip lift is going to be here in the center. And well, I'll save that for when we do the story on this tractor. Basically, well, I'll give you a little tidbit. This tractor, Dad didn't find out until he started working on it, actually came out of the factory on steel wheels with magneto ignition, no electrical system, so it didn't have the lights on or anything. This was a plain Jane tractor when it came out of the factory. So, yeah. So that's 4-speed. Now, we'll go over here and look at the 5-speed. If I can crawl over all this crap. We can always come back to need more storage space. Oh, and I know people are going to ask. That is a 5-speed 60. Not really much of a story behind that. Dad bought it long time ago as a runner with the intention of turning it into an off-road fork truck, but then, well, it's not down here right now, it's up in the garage, but everybody's seen it in the videos. Then our Clark showed up, and that basically removed the need for a off-road fork truck, and that got put on the back burner. But there's the back axle for it. You can kind of see that yellow thing right there is the mast for it. There's all the tin for it up there. So one of these days it's still going to get turned into an off-road fork truck. It's just not that high on the priority list right now. But we'll go look at the all original 5-speed over here, because it's easier to get to and you can see more of it. Okay, well, I guess I'll leave this on because you can kind of still need it. So, on a 5-speed 60, very first thing you'll notice off the bat, actually the very first two things you'll notice off the bat, is now it's got a bent gear shift that's taller and push the shifter over on the right, which, since the vast majority of people are right-handed, is the more natural position for it to be in. And now it's got the wide fat pedals with the connecting bar between them. And then your trip lift is now bent over on the side like the fleet lines are. Well, neither one of these have the trip lift on them anymore. But on the fleet line, this lever's over on this side. The other thing is, while the bosses for the bosses for them are still in the casting, there's no more levers in the front. And the reason being, and they never even made it to the test phase, they took them off as soon as they added the 5th gear to it. You don't want to be going down the road at 15 miles an hour, turn your wheels to make a tight turn, have a turning brake lock up, and roll the tractor over. So they got rid of that feature when they went to the 5-speed 60, because the 4-speed 60 was never a problem, because I think top speed on those is only like 5.5 or 6 mile an hour in 4th gear. Whereas the 5-speed 60, which actually isn't completely accurate, it's technically a 6-speed 60 with 2 5th gears in it. You don't want to have, or like I say, you don't want the brakes to be locking up while you're turning going down the road, so they got rid of that feature. And then also for road travel was the reason they added the equalizer bar in between them, so you could apply both brakes at the same time, also so you didn't roll the tractor over, applying more brake to one side than the other. And the reason I say it's technically a 6-speed with 2 5th gears is because we've had multiple guys at shows talking to them before, and this was before we actually had this tractor running. We had multiple guys at shows tell us that 1 5th gear is just a shade faster than the other. And just to test it out, the first day we had this thing running, 4 or 5 years ago, however long it's been now since I finally got it out and got it going again, we drove it down to the gas station in town, which from our house is pretty much exactly a mile. And I used 1 5th gear going down there, and then another 5th gear on the way back. And the trip back took us 2 minutes less, running wide open in wide open in 5th gear. But on these 60s, you've got your 5th gear in the high range H, and you've got your 5th gear in the low range H. This 5th gear down here, and it can only be like, if I never actually did the math on it, but it can't be more than like 3/4 to a mile an hour faster than this 5th gear. But this one is just a shade faster. So technically they could have labeled this thing as a 6-speed, but that mile an hour difference between the two probably, as far as a marketing standpoint, probably wasn't enough to make it a 6-speed transmission, so they just labeled it as a 5. So yeah, that's how you tell the difference between a 4-speed and a 5-speed 60. Now, why is this important? Because the 60s suffer from the same problem as the 70s. They put the serial number tag on the engine block. And just because this is a 47 4-speed or 5-speed, let's say this thing had a serial tag on it that said it was a 1942. Well, you can look at it, and from everything on the frame of the tractor, you know it's not a 42, but the engine or the serial number on the engine block says it's a 42. Well, at some point it must have roached their motor or something like that, and they went to a salvage yard, found an engine out of a 4-speed, dropped it in the tractor, and now the serial number says it's one thing, but it's actually another thing. This tractor is all original. We know the engine's right for it because we're only the second owners on it and all that stuff. And the other thing that the 60 suffered from, which was also another reason for the engine swaps, is the 60 is the only one to use a stamped steel mainframe. Front bolster is a casting and the rear end's a casting, but where's the split? From right there to right here, this is all stamped steel. And if all you ever did with it was drawbar work, you never had a problem. But when they started putting the cultivators on them, the torque from having them cultivators on there would twist the frame, and they were prone to cracking right about here. Actually, they'd crack here, and they'd crack somewhere in this. What they have right here is bracing that's hot riveted into the frame. They'd crack generally in these rivet holes if the rivets, because with the frame twisting, the rivets would get loose and they'd fatigue crack. And that was also another reason for a lot of engine swaps, is the frame would break and bust the dog ears or crack the block or something like that. Which is why the fleet lines went back to a cast engine tub. So, but the 60 itself was the, I guess if you want to call it, the prototype tractor for the fleet lines, because the 60 itself has a whole lot more in common with a fleet line tractor than it does with a 70 or an 80. As far as operator station layout, the way the pedals are laid out, the way the gear pattern's laid out, the 60 was their, I guess you want to call it their proof of concept tractor for the fleet lines. And as far as collectability goes, they are probably one of the least valuable tractors, or least valuable Olivers to have, but they are probably the funnest little bastards. I mean, I think shipping weight on these things was right around 1,100 pounds, somewhere between 1,100 and 1,500 pounds, I believe. Don't quote me on that. They're light as heck because of that stamped steel frame. And, I mean, you can haul them with like a 1/4 ton pickup. They don't weigh squat. If you got a 5-speed, they'll do 15.5, 16 mile an hour down the road, depending on what tires you have on it. You can get, it was a factory option, although a very, very rare factory option, to have 36-inch rubber on the back, which basically come out and fill the tires, or fill the fenders. And you put 36-inch rubber on that, it'll almost do 20. I mean, they are if you like doing tractor rides and stuff, get one of these things, put it up on 36-inch rubber. This thing will keep up with the big boys, no problem. And they don't use hardly any fuel. I mean, they're only 18 horse, and like I say, they're not worth squat because you can't throw a rock without hitting one. They built a shit ton of these things, and so I mean, you could pick them up cheap, and they're just fun little toys to have. And you can drive them around, use them for yard work and stuff, and they're so stinking light they won't tear the yard up. And I mean, there are exceptions to that price rule. Like the first time Dad took this thing down to Rand Tool, he had a guy at the show following him around all 4 days, and by the end of the 4th day, when we were loading it up, he was up to $3,500 trying to get Dad to sell him this tractor strictly because it's all original. Except for the wheels. The wheels are off of that tractor we're turning into a forklift because all the tires on it were shot when I finally got it going, and it was just easier to pull the wheels and tires off that thing and stick on it than get different tires. So, and then if you find a wide front 60, you're going to pay out the nose for it. And the reason being is, unlike the fleet lines where I could take my 66, drop the wide front out from under it, and put a narrow front underneath it in about an hour, because all you do is unbolt the front casting, unbolt the wishbone, and then the front bolster for the narrow front bolts right up on the bottom of the frame casting. On a 60, you have to change this whole front casting, and then you either need to have a frame to replace this one, or you have to have the plate to weld to the frame where the wishbone goes. Because on a wide front 60, there'd be, right about in here, there'd be a flat plate with your bolt pattern in it for the rear support of the wishbone, so you can put a wide front on it. So swapping between a narrow front and a wide front on a 60 is not an easy task, and finding a wide front 60 is not an easy task. I've only ever seen a handful come up for sale. The last one was one over in Wisconsin a guy had on Craigslist about 2 months ago, and he wanted $3,500 for it. And he probably got it because, as far as condition, it was in probably not quite up to the originality of this tractor, but it was darn close. It was all original paint. I think it even had the original tires on it still. It was a little sweetheart, but like I say, that's really the only two exceptions, is if you find one like this that is completely original, or you find one with a wide front. Then you're probably going to pay a little bit of money. But just your run-of-the-mill narrow front 34 or 32-inch rubber 60, you know, between $500 and $800 all day long, depending on basically how well it runs. And up until the biggest thing that killed the collectability on them was up until about 3-4 years ago, it was a bitch finding engine parts for them. Because I can't remember the displacement on this little Waukesha. I want to say it's like 143, something like it. It's a tiny little motor. And it's kind of the bastard child. They didn't use that in any other tractor. So you couldn't buy engine kits for them. You couldn't buy gasket kits for them. You couldn't buy manifolds for them. Well, now you can get a piston sleeve kit for it. You can get a full gasket set for it. So now they are starting to get where you can get parts for them. But like I say, they built so many of them, even that I doubt is going to bring the price up as far as collectability. But if you're just looking for a little toy to play with and put around the yard and do odd jobs and take to a show, or just go cruising around on the weekends or something, you can't beat a little 60. These are Dad's favorite tractor. That's how come we ended up with 3 of them. He loves the hell out of these little things. And they are fun. About the only thing that kills the usability of them, and you can add hydraulics to them fairly easily. All you gotta do is well, I wouldn't really put a PTO pump on them because they don't have live power takeoff. But you could put a crank drive pump on it, and you could put hydraulics on it, you know, maybe use it on a little yard trailer or something like that. But they're not really, because they were built back in the day when 3-points didn't really exist, or, well, they existed because the Ferguson system was out, but it wasn't really commonplace on a farm. These rear ends aren't really built heavy enough to build a 3-point to put on it. If you could put a 3-point on this tractor, oh my God, the stuff you could do with it, because it is so tiny and so nimble and so light. But as far as a general user, that's really the biggest thing that kills it, is you can't put a 3-point on it. You can put hydraulics on it, and that would really help with what you could do with it. But even at that, they're just a fun little toy. And eventually, we really need to get this thing up and redo the motor and fix the locking up problem it has, because it spun a main bearing, which is the biggest reason we don't really do anything with it. It runs good. It just, you can't really put any load on it because it'll start creeping up and heating that main bearing back up, and it'll lock it up. But old girl's on the list. She'll get done one of these days. So that kind of turned in from how to tell the difference between a 4 and a 5-speed to a little short-winded explanation of the 60 itself. But anyway, this will be your video for tonight. So I guess that does it for this one, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.